Hello and welcome to another episode of ProCoder's Best Practice Series. So today I'm going to be looking at refactoring. Now for those of you who don't know, refactoring is the process of going back over your code and reviewing it in terms of, can I make it easier to read? Can I clean it up? Can I add more comments to it? Can I rework it in a way that allows me to extend my code further in the future? So essentially, it's kind of like the process of going through a creative piece of writing where you've just got your ideas down and then cleaning up the grammar afterwards, making it cleaner, making it easier to read, making it flow better, etc. So in essence, that's what refactoring is. And today we're going to be looking at refactoring this ProCoder's Lambda function. So first of all, I'm just going to refamiliarize myself with the code itself, have a quick read through it, see what's going on. It's been a while since I've touched this. So this is just getting down how I want the functionality to work, how I want everything to work. Everything is now working. Now, a very important thing before you do any refactoring is ensuring that you have a solid test suite. So here I have my tests, and these all check. Let's clean this up. There we go. And these different test cases, so checking for outstanding balance. So this is all to do with handling payments, which is essentially what this is about. So I wrote an article about this earlier in terms of how to use serverless Lambda functions, Node.js 8.10 with Lambda, etc., and use an async await. That article is on the ProCoders website, and in that article I talk about how to build this function out essentially. So this is what we're looking at again here, and this is a function for checking if people have finished paying for the course. So the course is paid in installments or monthly installments, and this goes to check whether or not they've finished paying it, and if they have, to cancel their subscription. Because we're using Stripe for this, Stripe doesn't have the concept of paying for something in installments. It either has an outright transaction where you just pay a cost of one-off fee, or subscription, so you have a recurring fee over time. So what we've done is we've taken the subscription model and then using the Stripe API and webhooks, and we're using that to determine whether or not someone's paid for the course in full, at that point cancelling their subscription. So we're essentially creating a payment installment system out of the subscription API. If you want to know more about that, like I say, go to the ProCoders website, go to the blog, and I have a whole article on that. I will also add a link to that article within the description of this video, so you can find that out at a later date. Anyway, so let's come back to our test suite. So like I was saying, this is to do with handling payments. So we have one test for outstanding balance. So if a customer hasn't finished paying, what happens there? Finished payment, so they're finished paying, what happens there? If they've overpaid something, which should never happen, in that case, what should happen? We should get an error that gets notified so that we can do something about it and get a refund to the customer as soon as possible. Like I say, that should not happen, but we are catching it if it does happen. And also, if a user has no subscriptions, again, this should never happen. A user should always have a subscription, but if there's a user in there that doesn't have a subscription, we have an error to catch that as well. So we have tests around here. So we're using Jest for this. So if we just run the test suite here, so yarn test. There we go, there's our 4 specs, and they all pass. So it's vital that you have a solid test suite in place before you do any refactoring to ensure that you're not introducing any new bugs or breaking your code, etc. So now I'm just going to go through and have a look through here and just familiarize myself with it. And I'm going to clean up the naming of things. one of the hardest things in programming is naming things. I'm sure most of you listening will agree with that. It's very easy to write code at the end of the day, but trying to think of solid names for that is the hard bit. But it's important that you spend that time thinking how to name things, because essentially that is going to dictate how you design your application, how you build your application over time. That's going to influence it. So it's very important that you take the time and think about how you name something, because that makes it very clear as to what the piece of code you're doing, what concerns it covers. So I know it can be really exciting to go, oh, I just want to name this so I can carry on building out my implementation, because it's exciting to see code working, you building it out and getting it finished. But if you take the time to name things clearly, then you're going to save yourself so much more time in the future. So we're just going to go through this and clean this up. So one thing that I note is this accepts an argument called E. Now, I'm not a massive fan of variables that are just one letter. It's quite common in the JavaScript community to use E for, let's say, events. But if someone else is looking at projects, that could be error, it could be exception, it could be anything. Let's just be really clear, because you've saved yourself 4 characters, but you've not saved yourself that cognitive debt. You've increased the cognitive debt, the technical debt in the future, trying to understand your code when you come back to it. So just make sure that you make things clear to begin with. Now I'm just going to search for if E is defined anywhere else within this project. So with E being, that's another reason. If you were ever to search for this variable E within your project and you search for E, look how many results it comes at, 132. It's going to be hard to find it. In this case, I put a space after to make it a bit easier. Here we go. So we've got one down here. Luckily with standard JS, what it will do is it will underline any variables that you're using that haven't been defined. So in this case, this has picked it up for me. Event. There we go. So we've got those covered now. So event here, event body. Then we return the event in the response payload. So let's just run our test suite again to ensure we haven't broken anything. Yep, that's still working. Okay, I shall continue. Right, so what else have we got here? B, again, not great. So this is passing the event body, so I'm going to assume this is body. I'm going to call it as such. Do we have B anywhere else? Again, if I search for B, we've got 28. That's not too bad. Let's have a look. No, that looks quite good. Let's run our test suite again. Okay. So just going to see if there's any other variables I could clean up. So subscriptions, the subscriptions, ID, it's the ID, subscription plan, it's the plan ID. I think I'm going to call this subscription plan ID, just to make it a bit clearer, and I can see that is now missing there. Okay. Let's see what else we've got here. Query. Const query is customer ID, and we pass through paid, true, funded, false. So can we, query is very generic again. Can we be a bit more specific here? So work out the total for all successful payments made, paid charges. So I'm just going to call this paid charges query. Okay, that's a bit cleaner. Let's just run our test suite again. All good. Let's keep looking again. Prices. I've got a trailing space. Let's clean that up. Result. I'm going to call this result message, because result again doesn't really mean a hell of a lot. Where else is result being defined up here? There we go. Let's just check that's working. Okay. So I think for naming things, that's okay at this point. Next thing I'm going to look at is we have one function and it's pretty massive. Okay. Now we should be sort of following solid principles. So in this instance, we're going to be looking at each function having its own concern. So you should only be concerned about one thing. You should never do one thing. So at the moment, what we're doing, we're passing the body, getting the customer ID, querying for all the subscriptions, getting the ID and the plan ID. Then we're working out how many paid charges they have, added them all together and working out how much they've paid. Then going through the subscription prices, checking how much they have due, then checking the due against the total paid and responding to it. So that's got a lot of concern. So we're going to split this function into smaller functions. Now, a good rule of thumb for how long a function should be, or a method in a class should be, is 5 lines. Now, that's not always realistic, but if that's a goal that you aim for, that you always aim to try to get to a maximum of 5 lines, then ultimately your code is going to be cleaner, clearer, easier to read, easier to extend. So that's what we're going to start with now. So I'm going to leave this stuff up here for now, and I'm going to start looking in this try block, because we've got a lot in this try block. So I'm going to look for similarities with the code where they all have the same single concern and split them out in that way. So here we're defining subscriptions, taking the customer ID, working out what subscriptions they belong to. Okay, I'm happy for that to be a single function. So I'm going to take this out. Before I do that, actually, I'm just going to run a test suite one more time just to ensure that everything's still working. Okay, so let's take this out, and let's call this, let's just put this code here, const. So to do the subscriptions, get customer subscriptions. I think that's good enough. And what do we need for this query? We need the customer ID. What else do we need? So we need async there. Okay, so it's assigned but never used. So we want to return this to subscription ID, subscription plan ID. Okay, and now we need to call this. So if we go into here and we do, and we pass through the customer ID, then we need to return what we're returning for subscription ID. Yeah, it's an array, so we want to destruct it there. Okay. So I'm just gonna put a comment above here. Okay, customer description. Go to subscriptions. Right. Customer ID. Now this comment's almost superfluous because our code is so clear. We're calling get customer subscriptions. We're passing the customer ID through, and then we're getting the subscription ID and subscription plan ID back. So that's a great thing about writing really clear function names, variable names, class names, method names, etc. Just makes the code so much easier to read. So let's now just check everything's still working. And it's not. So what have we got here? Okay, customer subscriptions is not a function, or its return value is not iterable. Okay. I know, we need to put await here as it's an asynchronous function. There we go, and we're working. Cool. So next thing, work out total successful payments. So I'm gonna, even though it's only 2 lines, I'm still gonna split this out into another function. Const something equals async. Is it async? So yeah, async. And what do we need? We need customer ID again. Paid charges. We're going to retain paid charges. So what we're going to call this? Get all paid charges. Okay. And we need customer ID again. And what does that return? Paid charges. So we're going to call this paid charges as well. Paid charges equals await. Okay, let's check this still works. Cool. So here, add all together payments made and return total. So we're taking the paid charges and we're working out the total paid. So I'm going to put this into a function as well. Const, just put that in there. Don't need an await. Determine total paid. And this takes what paid charges. Just thinking whether or not I can make this a bit cleaner. I'm happy with that for now. So total paid. Paid charges. Now we've got this let find up here, we can get rid of that now. Let's check if this is still working. Yep, it's all good. So define the old subscription prices no longer exist. Work out how much they need to pay in total. Yeah, I'm happy for that to be another function. So determine total due. What do they need? Just a subscription plan ID. Okay. Turn total due. So let total due. Let's clean this up. What do they need? Subscription plan ID. Get rid of that. Okay, let's check everything's still working. Yep. Okay. Next one. Cancel subscription to finish paying for. Yep. Okay. Let's take this one out as well. Right. Cancel subscription if they pay in full. I'm going to call this. We can't really call it cancel subscription because they might not have paid in full. So this one here would be the cancel subscription. Otherwise, turn error or that. So I'm going to call this attempt to cancel subscription. What do we need? Total due, total paid, and subscription ID. Okay, that's on the limit of how many arguments I would want. You would never want any more than 3. This needs to be async. Result message, read. Yeah. We need to return it. Cancel subscription if customer has paid in full. We want result message equals. We want those 3 arguments. And this needs to be await because we have the sync. We have a wait here. And then we can get rid of that one up there. So we've already cleaned that bit up there. I think I'm going to also split this out just to keep this function a little bit cleaner, a little bit smaller. I'm going to call, so this basically returns an error. Const the error response, and this needs the error and the event. Let's see if that's still working. Did a bit too much there before I actually tested it. So can't read body of undefined response. Body. This is when the errors occur. JSON pass. That's under that way, so something's not being returned. There we go. So we also need to return from here. Okay. So this has cleaned up this try catch block massively. We can see we do some logic and then we return the result, or we catch an error and return the error response. Makes it much easier to read. And if I need to find out, okay, what's happening within here, I can simply just go to that function and look at the logic there. I don't need all that logic within this one function. It's simply just following the paper trail essentially and just going, okay, that seems to be doing what it needs to be doing, and it responds what it does. If I need to find out more, if I need to extend it or I need to debug it, I know exactly where to look because everything is much cleaner. Everything has its own concern in terms of functions. However, I still want to clean up one more thing. So this overlying function is now called payments. And I need something a bit more descriptive for that. So it's not payments, is it? What is it essentially doing? So it's getting the customers, it's working out how much they've paid, and then it's trying to cancel it. So I'm going to do check the customer for completed payments, I think. And then export that there as well. There we go. So in essence, that is refactoring. I think you'll all agree that this is much cleaner now. Let's put that in there. Everything has its own concern. It's only concern about what it's doing. We're very close to just having 5 lines. We haven't got massively over it. That's probably one of the more complicated ones, potentially this one. This is much cleaner now. So I'm happy with that. I hope you enjoyed it. Just to reiterate one more time, when you're refactoring, you must ensure you have a solid test suite in place so that you're not introducing any new bugs or anything like that, or breaking your code in any way. So if you're going to go and refactor and you don't have a test suite, please implement a test suite first before doing any refactoring. It's just going to save you so much more time, and you're going to be so much more confident that the changes you're making are not breaking anything. As you saw when I was refactoring there, I introduced a couple of bugs. I broke the code a few times, but as I had the test suite, I could quickly fix those. And when you're refactoring, go through and make sure you've named things clearly. Improve the naming conventions. It doesn't matter how long your names are. You're not saving any space. Essentially, this is server side stuff. I mean, even on the client side, it's going to be gzipped as well. Anyway, you're not working in the 70s where every byte is necessary. So use descriptive naming conventions for your variables, your classes, your functions, your methods, and split. Don't just have one huge massive function that does everything under the sun. Split it out into separate concerns and call them where they need to be called. And it will just make your life so much easier. You'll be able to code much more efficiently in the future when you're trying to extend stuff or implement new features. It's going to be so much quicker to understand where you are, what code you need to touch, and how you're going to extend that. So refactoring is very important. Just like if you're writing an essay or something like that, you first get your ideas down, not worrying about the grammar so much, because the most important thing is getting the implementation down, your ideas. Then you can go through, and if with writing, you can go through, clean up the grammar, make it flow better, make it easier to read. Programming is exactly the same. Get the implementation down, get those ideas down, and then go back and refactor it. Okay, thanks a lot for listening, guys. I hope it was useful. Thanks a lot. Bye.